We are here at the European Energy Transition Conference for a workshop on clean energy with clean conscience. We have part of the panel here in the room with us and part of the panel online. So I would like first to welcome who is in the room with us. So good afternoon to who is here, and also good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who is joining us on WebEx or is watching the video of this event. To welcome you to this event, it's my pleasure to turn now to Jean-Pierre Raymond, who is the Executive Director of 2050 today. So Jean-Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Diana. Very warm welcome to all of you, be it here in the room or online. By the way, a very big room, so it will be a bit noisy. I hope you can hear us quite well. So I would like to give you a very warm welcome on behalf of the Geneva House first, because we are a coalition of different entities, the canton, the city of Geneva energy provider, and 2050 Today. 2050 Today represents here 60 international organizations and permanent missions that are all united to go for zero emissions. So it's a big challenge, and we will try to meet it as soon as possible. So we are delighted this afternoon to have this wonderful panel that has been organized by some precisely of the members of 2050 Today, be it WHO or the Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, and also International Service for Human Rights, and of course the Geneva Environment Network. In addition, we have also the pleasure to have the Franciscans International. The discussion we will have this afternoon is extremely important in my view, because we all speak of energy transition, moving to clean energies and so on. Of course, it's a challenge we have, but we should not forget the people in this challenge. And the people, the first thing we have to do is to have respect for human rights. So in making this transition, we should take the opportunity to improve drastically respect for human rights. We have to be at peace with nature, but first of all, we have to be at peace with us. So respect for human rights is the first element to be achieved if we'll have to just and real and long and lasting transition that at the end of the day will change the world. Because make no mistake, the transition is a nice word to say we need a revolution. I mean, the pace that is needed should be accelerated. I mean, the challenge we have in front of us is so huge, we have not a single minute to lose. That's why I'm not going to make it too long and give immediately the floor to our moderator, Mariana Bolshakova, who is the Regional Coordinator for Environmental Law and Governance at UNEP Europe Office. So my pleasure to hand over to you, Mariana.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre, and good afternoon, everybody. There is a lot of competition in this building with the sound, so I hope you do hear us well, but if there are announcements coming in, we'll need to pause. Energy transformation is absolutely essential if we are to meet SDGs, if we are to meet our climate goals, and failing to transform how we produce and use energy is basically not an option anymore. It would in itself affect millions of livelihoods and millions of people and communities across the world. But the transition itself can have very, very significant impact on those same individual and communities, as Jean-Pierre just so eloquently pointed out. So it is all in how we go about it and what approaches we use in transforming energy sectors. Rights-based approach in this transition is key to securing equitable and sustainable universal access to energy and to correcting inequalities, including the impacts on the most vulnerable communities and the most vulnerable groups. So I'm very excited to moderate the panel today because we do have 5 panelists that come from very different perspectives and very different sectors. And I will pass the floor right away to our first panelist, and each will have about 5 minutes to introduce their perspectives and views, and then We hope to have a very active discussion, so I encourage people in the room and those who are online to please post your questions, raise your hands, so that we can have that active discussion. So my first panelist today is Anna Devesa, who is Sustainable Environment Management Specialist at the UN Office of High Commissioner on Human Rights. Anna?
Thank you very much, Mariana. Thank you, Jean-Pierre, and all the co-organizers of Maison Genève for this workshop and our fruitful collaboration the past months. Today, I would like to share some messages that are part of two documents that OHCHR has been working on. One about renewable energy and the right to development, and the second one on environmentally sound technologies and the right to development, realizing human rights for sustainable development. And you can see these documents outside here in the stand and also online in the chat. And we are facing a triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And the energy sector plays a key role because 2/3 of the global emissions go from energy production and use, and also the life cycle of many technologies. For instance, coal, in mining and in combustion, they release toxic ashes that contaminate water and jeopardize health and well-being of people. And this violates the right to life, the right to water and sanitation, and the recently recognized right to a health, clean, and sustainable environment. And the local decisions that we make, they have global consequences. The carbon budget is only one, and 1 ton of CO2 here or in South America will have the same impact on the atmosphere, but the consequences for vulnerable populations are disproportionate. So the right to development of not only current but future generations are at risk because they are the ones living longer with these consequences. So, for instance, in the Rio Declaration from '92, in Principle 3, we talk about the right to development. It must be fulfilled to equitably meet the developmental and environmental needs of present and future generations. And I think the clean energy transition is an opportunity for a just transition. And for this, we need an enabling environment to equitable access to renewable energy. For governments, it means that they need to create a conducive investment environment for renewables, and for business that they need to include mitigation at the center of their business models. And this comes by, for instance, investing in research and development. And this can in turn promote the right to livelihood and to decent work, because projections show that the renewable jobs will offset the job losses in the fossil fuels sector. And another point that I would like to make is gender equality, because in the renewable energy industry, women entrepreneurs face huge challenges, especially in finding loans and developing their businesses. But they could be active change agencies, for instance, in off-grid projects. So we need to develop new skills and capacity building for women, for youth, and this relates to data science, to digital technologies, and to fight the discrimination that exists in these industries and in the IT industry. And finally, I would like to bring one example of what OHCHR is doing that relates with our participation in 2050 today. We, in our offices in Lebanon, they are facing a severe fuel crisis and extended power outages, with electricity as scarce as 45 minutes a day. And in many villages where our colleagues are working from home because of COVID and other challenges, private generators only work during the night. So for this, we bought mobile solar chargers for them, so they could increase their productivity and work during the day and also manage with the batteries. So this is one example on how we can build resilience to crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this message. Our next panelist is Heather Eder Rohani, who is a technical lead on energy and health at the World Health Organization. And I understand Heather's joining us online, so over to you.
Thank you, and thank you all for this opportunity, and thank you to the Geneva House, the organizers, and the other UN agencies that have been working to really advocate and have this event. So yes, my name, as mentioned before, is Heather Eder Rohani, and I'm the technical lead on health and energy at WHO, as well as the current acting unit head on air quality and health. So why WHO is here? Why energy? Energy is extremely important for protecting people's health. It's important to preventing disease, as well as to ensuring access to delivery of healthcare services, particularly in low and middle income countries, as well as really lessening the footprint of the health sector in terms of carbon emissions, so really achieving our 2050 goals. Air pollution itself, WHO estimates that around 7 million premature deaths each year are caused due to exposure to air pollution around the world. So air pollution is a problem that we're facing all around the world, whether in high-income countries, low-income countries, no matter what, we are all exposed to very unhealthy air. Now, much of this air pollution is actually due to the inefficient combustion of fuels and inefficient combustion of fuels, which leads to a lot of health-damaging pollutants released into the air. It leads to diseases. The 7 million deaths include diseases such as heart disease, stroke, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, pneumonia, and lung cancer. Additional evidence and epidemiological evidence is showing that there's even additional diseases associated with air pollution exposure. Everything from adverse pregnancy outcomes, so premature births are happening, low birth weight babies are due to air pollution exposure in the womb. We have, for example, cognitive issues being associated, new emerging evidence suggesting that, as well as we have diseases like diabetes, children who are unable to create their academics, are unable to do as well in school and things due to exposure in the womb and as early child to air pollution. So there's a lot of advantage of really, and again, much of this air pollution is due to the lack of access to clean and efficient and renewable energy in the home and in industry, in cities, in the rural communities, in the urban areas. All these places are where people are living and exposing to air pollution that is due to inefficient combustion of fuel and energy. So basically, SDG 7, where you have 3 goals associated with access to energy, universal access to modern energy services, doubling the reliance on renewable energy, and increasing the efficiency, all have benefits for health and improving and protecting people from disease. So this is really important for not only us living in the Western and high-income countries where we can easily flip a switch and things, but it's also very important for those people who are living with absolutely no energy as well. There's many opportunities to protect health. In addition, as climate change is also an important thing, air pollution is one of the major forces in climate change itself. So by mitigating and addressing air pollution, you're also tackling climate change at its heart. So there's many opportunities and synergies. I'd really like to, this particular panel is really focused on this idea of energy as a human right. And I think this is really, really critical. So I'd like to take a little bit of a deeper dive into this idea of access to energy in low and income countries, in particular households and healthcare facilities. WHO, as the custodial agency for the Clean Cooking SDG 7, we have estimated just recently and will be launching in just a couple hours a new report which estimates around 2.4 billion people still lack access to clean cooking for their main cooking. This doesn't include those people who are using inefficient cooking just part of the time. These are people that are just using it for mainly. So this number is probably bigger. And so this 2.4 billion people leads to about 3.2 million premature deaths each year. And these are people living in homes with so many other problems that they have to face each day. They're low income homes, the poorest of the poor, so they're very vulnerable to disease. They often have to spend many hours collecting fuel and water, and so they're traveling hours and that they could be spending going to school or producing an income and what have you. So by providing access to clean energy in the home, we are really advancing these people's lives and really making themselves have a more fruitful and fair and equitable life and opportunity to really live the fullest that they can and protect their health. So in addition, so we are really focused at WHO on really trying to accelerate this access to clean cooking as well as access to electricity. And in many cases, that requires reliance on more renewable fuels, particularly for those areas, more rural areas where decentralized renewable energy systems are going to be absolutely critical to ensuring that they get access to clean cooking, clean heating, and clean lighting in the home to protect the health of themselves, their family members, and the community itself. So this is one way. And then also the improvement in efficiency. We are actually seeing a really important transition where many in low and middle income countries, where there's the opportunity to actually transition from simple polluting fuels and technologies such as cooking over an open fire, using unprocessed coal and simple stoves, charcoal and simple stoves, where lots of pollution is being pushed. There's this opportunity where we're actually seeing improvements in, for example, thermal efficient cookers that are being able to pair with, for example, solar home systems or induction cookers. This is where we're really trying to push, where we can really tackle this energy efficiency while also tackling the energy access problem at the same time with renewable energy to really protect the health of the people. So this is one area where clean energy in the home can really protect the health of people and really reduce the air pollution that we're all exposed to with clean fuels and technology. In addition, not only can that protect health and reduce air pollution energy, but in addition, it can help deliver care. WHO is about to launch a new report in July, which will provide the first global status on the electrification of healthcare facilities. And one of the more recent studies has shown about 25% of healthcare facilities in sub-Saharan Africa have absolutely no access to electricity at all. So basically, women and children, women are having to give birth in the dark with no lighting, no operational equipment. There's no opportunity for fetal heart monitors. There's no incubators available, etc. for these people that are really in desperate need for medical services. So WHO is also really trying to capitalize on the opportunities that decentralized renewable energy and other clean energy solutions can have, and promoting grid extension, et cetera, to ensure that the healthcare facilities, hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, et cetera, have the energy that's needed to actually provide minimum delivery of healthcare services to not only protect the health from air pollution by clean energy, but also to treat the disease that people are faced with and prevent them from having more chronic diseases in the long term. So again, this is this vicious cycle. So the lack of access to energy in the home leads to disease, and then these people will go to the hospitals or healthcare facilities, and there'll be no electricity. So by providing this access to electricity, we can really prevent disease in the home and really protect the health of people and make sure that disease is addressed. So we at WHO has really prioritized this. We have our Health and Energy Platform of Action that's been convened with the World Bank, UNDP, and UNDESA, and in the support of the International Renewable Energy Agency, that's really working with building a network to really tackle the health and energy issues, particularly access, to make sure that we can protect the health of the poorest populations of this world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. And I'm passing on the floor to another remote participant. I understand quite remote in terms of distance. Leon Duse comes from the Philippines, and he's an environmental defender and a member of the Kalikistan People's Network for the Environment. Leon?
Good evening from the Philippines. Can you hear me clearly? I was having global south problems with our internet. So good evening from the Philippines, and thank you especially to our friends from the ISHR for giving us the opportunity to discuss our perspective on the issue of just transition and human rights. When we talk about transitioning humanity towards a livable climate future, we often tend to funnel the discussion down to just three simple buckets. So the first bucket is to stop any further burning of fossil fuels. The second is to protect our last remaining forests and other carbon sinks. And the third is to shift towards clean and renewable energy sources. But these buckets run deep, especially for climate vulnerable and impoverished states like the Philippines. Stopping fossil fuel extraction and consumption in the Philippines means you have to ensure that Filipino workers employed by fossil fuel plants and mines, fossil fuel-based transportation, are ensured of their labor rights and transitioned to alternative green jobs. It means you have to ensure that we receive enough financial and technical support to make the transition to renewable energy without sacrificing our right as a people, as a nation, to develop and to modernize. A right that is hinged on having an adequate supply of power. It means that you also have to ensure that when you regulate agriculture in the Philippines, which is agriculture is a major source of methane, we have to ensure that you zero in on agribusinesses instead of imposing the burden on small farmers who represent 75% of our nation's population. When we talk about protecting our carbon sinks, it means you have to ensure that the more than 40 million natural resource dependent Filipinos are not arbitrarily ejected from their lands and territories by what we call fortress conservation approaches. It means that their lives, their livelihood and dignity should be integrated into the management of these landscapes and seascapes. Now, when we talk about boosting the shift to renewable energy, that means you have to be vigilant over the expected surge of demand for renewable energy's material base. The lands, the metals and minerals, timber, water, and other raw materials necessary to produce wind, solar, hydro, biomass, and geothermal energy technology. So in the Philippines, that means anticipating the possible increase of large-scale mining for transition metals and minerals, of forest and agricultural land use conversion into big energy infrastructure. That means you have to redress the inevitable spike in the conflict between big businesses and governments against land and environmental defenders opposing them. Mining is in fact one of the top drivers of killings of Filipino environmental defenders, as it is linked to 43% of all reported deaths that we have monitored among environmental defenders. There is also a fourth bucket for us climate vulnerable nations that are oftentimes sidelined in any talk of a just transition. And that is the reality that we are already experiencing the impacts of a climate changed world. It means you have to address the typhoons and other extreme weather events, as well as the slow onset impacts experienced by our various affected sectors, the workers, the indigenous people, the small farmers, the fisher folk. And that is on top of the other above mentioned hardships that a transition will entail. You also have that context in the Philippines where we have corrupt and fascist governments like the incoming Marcos Duterte regime, helmed by the son and daughter of tyrants who have run history of or have a running history of brutally silencing dissent and criticism and of self-enriching themselves through mining and infrastructure. This further complicates the question of delivering just compensation or the question of delivering a just transition to the Philippines from developed nations. No? And actually that underscores how it is very crucial, no? that the protection, the respect, and the remedy of the rights of Filipino land and environmental defenders, how it is crucial that this be the central framework for peoples, nations, and corporations who want to deliver climate justice and want to deliver a just transition. Land and environmental defenders are at the front lines in protecting carbon sinks, in holding the line against development aggression, and in innovating climate solutions that will ensure that no one is left behind. So we urge everyone to work directly with land and environmental defenders. Do not work against us, and it will give you a direct line to the most affected peoples and areas of the world by the climate crisis. It will give you a direct line to the people who are most motivated to find the most sustainable solutions that will work for all of humanity, for our common home, and for our future generations. Maraming salamat, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss this issue.
Thank you, Leon. I'm moving swiftly to another continent. And we've got Rodrigo Perez, who is from the Franciscan Order and is with Franciscans International in Brazil. So, Rodrigo, please, over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I want to start highlighting that we have a huge challenge, and then we can't deny the transitions to renewable energies and just transitions. But I would like to highlight from our perspective, from the affected communities in Latin America, and especially in Brazil. I think confining the debate on the climate crisis to a simple substitution of energy resources will cause an increase in environmental conflicts involving the mineral sector, especially in countries in the global south. So the myth of green, sustainable, and climate-smart mining are the mining sector narrative strategies to present them as a solution to the climate crisis to attract investors. However, what we see around the world, mining always implies violence and human rights violations, environmental and ecological sacrifice, conflict with and within the affected communities, labor exploitation, and deepening of socio-economic inequalities. Another issue is the extraction and processing of minerals to produce solar panels, wind turbines, and battery cause significant social environmental impacts. So the concept of clean energy should be considered a contradiction in terms. In the so-called lithium triangle formed by the salt flats of Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina, production has already generated water scarcity. So the projected demand for critical minerals over the next 30 years exceeds the known reserves of some specific minerals. Another aspect that is important to highlight and to discuss is the geopolitical dynamics that support climate transition indicate a disproportionately high energy consumption by the countries of global north, as well as their central role in the adoption of new power generations technology with lower carbon emissions. At the same time, there is currently a concentration of extraction in countries in the global south, and there are prospects for future expansion of critical minerals in those places. The Amazon is the main mineral frontier in Brazil, and the expansion of mining has significantly contributed to the deforestation in the region, affecting water crisis in the country, which is currently going through. Assessments of the current and potential extraction of critical minerals in Brazil indicates a series of ongoing conflicts and likely growth of disputes over water, deforestation, and of pressure on indigenous lands. In Brazil, mining conflicts teach that life in the territories must be taken into account, in particular the social environmental bias against the advance of mining highlights the territory as a space of resistance and also as a place of resignification and creation of new social, economic, and environmental relationships. Thus, social movements, communities affected by mining, and the struggles establish criteria that we're trying to define what we call territories free from mining, considering 4 issues. First, to question the unequal control over common goods and the environmental injustice that structures mineral expansion. Second, to defend and propose true solutions that preserve biodiversity and generate social and economic benefits directly or indirectly for the whole society. The third, to exercise the political practice of autonomy and solidarity of the communities in their territories. To demand a just transition and full restitution for violations and social environment impacts. Hold corporations and governments accountable for crimes against people and the environment. Paying fine is not enough. An urgent struggle is to guarantee the direct intervention of organized society in order to fight to establish the right to say no. I think this is the perspective that we need to look for this issue. Of course, the Binding Treaty on Business and Human Rights is extremely important, and the involvement of different sectors, especially the European Union, who's talking about due diligence, who's talking about the plan of action on raw materials to sustain the supply chains. And it's interesting because all these definitions of what is critical minerals, new commodities to nations' economy and security, in this sense, the concept of criticality of these mining commodities is very dynamic. Geological scarcity, geopolitical issues, country instabilities, trade policies, market cycles, high investment costs, consumerism demand are among other factors. So it's very fluid, and it's very interesting, and I will finish to talk about energy transition without questioning the intensity of global energy consumption, particularly in rich countries, is false solution. Studies indicate that considering the horizon 2050, if we simply maintain the same pattern of energy consumption and only replace energy sources, there will not be enough reserves of cobalt, lithium, or nickel to meet the demand. And so I think we have a huge challenge. It's extremely necessary to face the issue, to discuss this challenge, but we need to look for the communities, and we look to different ways of doing this. Energy cannot be seen as only business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this issue of community engagement and in general consultation and the rights is really crucial. So I'm giving the pleasure to give the floor to Anastasia Giardosi, who is an associate expert in legal affairs with the Aarhus Convention Secretariat. And of course, the Aarhus Convention is the convention about public participation. So please, Anastasia, over to you.
Thank you, Mariana. I would like to thank the Geneva Environment Network and the other co-organizers of this event for inviting me to talk about the importance of the Aarhus Convention's rights in this transition towards clean energy. So the Convention on Access to Information, Public Participation, and Access to Justice in Environmental Matters, the Aarhus Convention, provides for minimum rights of the public, and this includes individuals and NGOs, in the areas of access to information, public participation in decision-making, and access to justice in environmental matters, including in the energy sector. And in transitioning towards more sustainable energy pathways, the parties, the state parties to the Aarhus Convention need to uphold these procedural rights that are enshrined in a legally binding document. And the scope of the rights is set out in the Convention, and it's also further clarified by the findings of the Compliance Committee, which is the body that ensures that the parties to the Convention respect the provision of this instrument. And while the Convention focuses on procedural rights, these are clearly linked to the substantial dimension of the human right to the environment that has been recently recognized by the Human Rights Council. And as stated by the Special Rapporteur, Human Rights and the Environment, Dr. David Boyd, the procedural rights are actually essential complements of the substantive rights because they ensure that the latter are fulfilled. And so turning first to the right of access to environmental information, this constitutes the basis for an effective public participation. The public cannot participate in a decision on renewable energy if it's not sufficiently informed. So the convention requires public authorities to respond to environmental information requests from the public in a timely manner and in the form that is requested and without having to state an interest. And the committee has multiple times also stated that environmental information needs to be interpreted in a broad manner. So it includes factors including energy, and thus information on renewable energy policies should be included falls under this definition. And any exceptions to its disclosure of this information needs to be interpreted restrictively. So it needs to take into account the public interest served by the disclosure and also whether it concerns emissions into the environment. And turning to public participation, this is crucial in the process of transition towards clean energy, as we have also underlined, because if the public is able to participate from the outset, then this leads to more sustainable outcomes and more legitimate and effective projects. So this will also contribute to ensure that the transition is just, that no one is left behind, and that this transition is participatory. The Aarhus Convention recognizes the right to public participation in decision making with respect to decisions on specific activities, and also on plans, programs, and policies, and legally binding instruments. Therefore, also those including the development and the use of sustainable energy sources. And the Compliance Committee has, for example, stated that the National Renewable Energy Action Plan that is developed by the EU member states under the Renewable Energy Directive constituted a plan or program relating to the environment which required public participation to be carried out. And in accordance with the convention, public participation needs to be allow the public to participate effectively, so within reasonable time frames. It should also be conducted at an early stage when all options are open and so the public can effectively participate. And due account must be taken of the outcome of public participation. And finally, in this transition towards clean energy, also the right of access to justice is fundamental, because it is the tool through which the right of access to information and public participation are enforced. And also, it also ensures the compliance with other environmental laws. And finally, I would like to touch upon a topic which is of crucial importance for the transition towards clean energy, and this is the protection of environmental defenders, given their role in holding essential information about the harms that are associated with business operation, but also their crucial role in protecting the environment. And we know that as the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights has stated, and human rights defenders have stated, the human rights defenders face significant threats, and in this respect, the Aarhus Convention provides a powerful tool, which is the Article 3, Paragraph 8 of the Convention, which ensures that parties must ensure that the parties must respect that they should ensure that people should not be penalized, persecuted, or harassed in their exercises of their rights. So, also just to conclude, the Aarhus Convention meeting of the parties has recently established a rapid response mechanism in the form of a special rapporteur who will be in charge of dealing with violations of Article 3, Paragraph 8. So it will intervene in a rapid manner to safeguard the lives of human rights defenders. And I will conclude here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. I'm now looking to my colleagues to tell me if there are, but first of all, I'm looking to the room here, if there are any questions in the room here to the excellent 5 presentations raising very interlinked topics on a very complex issue, and the issue that's becoming more and more complex every day.
Thank you very much. It is a complex issue, but I have a comment, if I can share my own comment. I can go? Yeah, thank you very much. Then I just want what I want to share with you, just because lady just raised a decent work. I want to underline more on the green job, which is very interesting program launched in ILO, International Labour Organization, and the yearly conference, ILO, it's running right now, which could be really better if we organize the same panel at least tomorrow in ILO before the end of the yearly conference on next Friday. But what I want to share with you, yes, because our Aarhus Convention, it is a regional convention, it is not international convention. Yesterday, during the plenary, panelists raised the wetlands zone read, but wetlands, it is administered by international conventions. It is Ramsar Convention. And he said wetlands could be, it is skin, yeah, carbon skins, puis du pétrole, puis de carbone, carbon skins, which is very interesting. Yes, he mentioned that. He said that. But more. But because if we talk nowadays about another step, as you said, we change the world. It is 50 years since Stockholm Conference 1972. But then we can exclude Ramsar Convention, which have been adopted in 1971. What would be really better? I don't want to share many things with you because what I want to say also, yes, the information society process is still going on in ITU this week, and there we're still talking on new tech and energy and transitions and wetlands. Last item, what I want to share with you, because we are thinking about today, and today it's better than tomorrow. And the logo, 2050 today, which is very ambitious. Yes. Everybody can be agree. But if it is for today, not for the day after tomorrow, then the logo could be adopted with various colors, not the same colors. And we can also add, we can make various characters, another police, not the same police. And it will be more appreciated and attractive like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a question online, which from one of the participants online, that reads, what should businesses do concretely, first and foremost, to ensure that human rights are ensured? So I'm gonna look to the Human Rights Office perspective, particularly on the business sector. What would be the concrete actions that the business sector should do already today to make sure human rights are integrated and a human rights-based approach is integrated in energy transition?
Thank you for the question. Well, I think they could act upon the business and human rights principles established by the UN, and also develop programs for this capacity building, like our colleague in Philippines was saying, like we need to shift this job market that is currently in fossil fuels to one that has the skills necessary for renewable energy. And to meet this great challenge to bring 2050 to today, we need to do this quickly. And I think the new normal is showing us new ways to do that, and this is an opportunity for businesses. And I think our presence here today in this conference is showing a willingness to collaborate in this regard.
Thank you. Just checking if others, also the panelists online, would like to take up this question. Just a second. Anybody would like to, just from the panelists, if they wanted to add anything on the business?
They are.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I think one crucial step that businesses who try to engage with the communities that they can take is to, to really treat the human rights due diligence process with sanctity, to ensure that you enter into a due diligence process with nothing yet going forward in the projects. the tendency, for instance, here in the Philippines is that human rights due diligence processes become just check boxes to tick for compliance, for instance, to get premium financing and whatnot. Instead of not actually going forward with any aspect of the project until human rights due diligence is successfully concluded. The first step is always the crucial step. There is an example here in the Philippines where you have a Dutch Aero City project. It's going to dredge and reclaim in Manila Bay and construct a huge airport complex on top of mangrove and fisheries areas. And they engage in a due diligence process when the domestic government has already railroaded approval for environmental compliance, have already railroaded any social acceptability. So we urge businesses to enter into human rights due diligence not as a perfunctory checkbox, but to really respect that you include communities and include defenders at the onset of the process, even before you start any construction, even before you start any development of any project, whether it's mining or even renewable projects, because renewable energy projects here in the Philippines are also large scales at certain points and result into land grabs and displacement as well if you do not engage in proper human rights due diligence.
Rodrigo, I understand you also wanted to add on that point, and maybe also because you mentioned that issue of the due diligence requirements in the global north, given the issue of where the most consumption of those materials destructive happens. So maybe you could also address what requirements are needed.
Yeah, I agree with what Leon has just said. I think the role of the communities are extremely important as real decision makers in the licensing process, and we need to go toward more binding instruments that can really oblige countries and companies to be fulfilling the human rights, because the guiding principles, they are voluntary principles. They're not sufficient. They have been showing this up to now, and I think if we see from the perspective, when we look at the distribution of these minerals around the world, we see that they are mainly located in middle and low income countries. For example, if we see these regions, 93% of rare earth reserves are in those countries, 83% of the manganese, 69% of cobalt and bauxite. And these countries are the ones who will receive the impacts, and the conflicts will be concentrated. So these societies have the right to say no, and the possibility also, I think, to go towards a more to more restitution in terms of violations and social environmental impacts, but also to hold them accountable, those companies, for the crimes against people and the environment. So the role of the communities in the territories are extremely important. Otherwise, we are going to just substituting technologies and keeping these critical minerals as instruments of a so-called clean energy when there is no clean.
Yeah, it's very hard to have a clean energy, so definitely. There is a question in the room, so.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about. Oh, should I get into the image? Thank you very much. My question is a bit broad, but more focusing on Mrs. Jadrossi's topic, meaning the right to information, and how can a discussion around climate change, its impacts, and all the things that come after, talking about human rights, talking about the consequences on water, on the environment, on biodiversity loss. When we have these panels, when we have the opportunity to discuss among ourselves, we all work in this field, we all have information, because we are working on an everyday
basis, we all have tasks that are related to the environment. I myself work currently with municipalities on renovation issues. And as a citizen, when I discuss these matters with people that are outside of this bubble, I will call it, it's very often that when we tackle the issue of climate change, it's always related to, yes, I would like to have solar panels on my house, but it's expensive. I also know that it's also not good for the environment in the end because of the mining issues. So the whole climate debate is focusing actually on renewables versus the lifestyle and the economy. And so my question concerns who should we talk to? Which actors should we try to engage in the discussion? I also have in mind, for example, I come from France, and in my country we have the most used channels of information are obviously the television, the radio, and most of it is, so we have a few public channels and also a lot of private ones. I will make a comparison with Fox News, for example, in the United States and other types of channels. And I would like to know, how can we get out of our bubble, and who should we talk to? Which actors should we engage in order to change this dichotomy and this discrepancy between people who are from the left wing that look in certain, use certain media channels to get informed, and the other, because we all know now the current political situation and the ways that we get informed through social media. It's all being very divided and divisive currently. And so my question probably, how can we try to engage citizens as well when we see that with the last IPCCR reports being out, we talk more about Messi or whatever sports event that happened than actually the very important outcomes of this report.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to Anastasia. Just to add, yesterday we had another panel discussion, and one of the experts in that discussion noted that we talked a little bit about the history of Aarhus, ESPO, and all these regional conventions. And one of the experts noted that now there are questions, particularly in the EU, in terms of how far you go with public participation. Because if you want to move to sustainable development, if you want to implement the Green Deal, there is also danger about, how do you engage and what voices you get in the end, and, will you enable a sustainable approach? Because public participation can also lead to kind of very populist views coming through and influencing the development process. So difficult. I think that's kind of building on the question from the previous speaker.
Thank you for the question. So I'll try first to build upon what the question that you mentioned before about the right of access to information, and it's very tricky. And indeed, I think that the first challenge with respect to access to information is first and climate information as well, is the lack of awareness among citizens about actually their rights to have this opportunity to request information, public authorities that they have, and also in relation to this, the opportunity to get informed, and also in this way be able to participate effectively to decisions that will impact their present and their future. And with respect to and also this the tools of communication are also quite a can represent a challenge, because not all the segments of population have the same access to information worldwide. So this is when you talk about access to information, certainly you need to take into consideration certain circumstances within realities, and this is something the committee, for example, takes into account when it makes its findings in the different parties to the convention. And talking about the quality and the types of inputs in the public participation procedure, what I can say is that in that public participation and the involvement of the citizens, something that is enshrined in Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration, and this is actually the Aarhus Convention implements this principle because it takes for it starts from the presumption that the quality of the information of the public participation is improved and is more legitimate, and you would also avoid certain let's say reaction or opposition at a advanced stage of a development or of a policy if you involve the public as much as possible. So indeed it's a tricky question because there are various interests to take into account, and also there are some assumptions that needs to be addressed. So I will give the floor to.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a point about what was said previously about energy efficiency, because I think this is the first step in this transition. Like, more than ways to produce energy is not need that energy. And I think we need to talk to the youth because they are already engaged, and they are the ones that will suffer the consequence the most. And we need to do this by going where they are, which is social media. So we cannot, as human rights actors, wait for people to come and search for information. We need to reach them. And why not using what they're using? Let's go to TikTok. Let's do some effort to present the information in the ways that they consume.
Thank you. That's an important point, Diana. We need to have a next event on TikTok.
Heather.
And there is another comment from Heather.
Yes, I just kind of wanted to complement some of the discussion regarding this idea of awareness and public awareness. But I think there's also the importance of making sure, for the access point of view in terms of energy, one of the largest challenges is for actually the users to understand, because we really want to have a change and we want to have this transition. We have to make sure that the actual people, the users themselves, understand the benefits and the positive aspects of using more efficient, more renewable and cleaner energy, and how it benefits them and benefits their environment and the broader context and community. So I think this is an important aspect that, indeed, I think this idea of talking to TikTok and using other forms of communication are really going to be important for this transition to clean energy, because we need the large populations, often those that are less educated, to really understand what's important. I also think not only is it the population, but we need people from other sectors also willing to make contributions and understand the importance of linkages. WHO has been really working hard over this past for a decade to really make sure that the health community can be better champions and really advocate for this energy transition, because they're another angle where we can really have, I mean, who are you going to trust more than your doctor or your nurse who's telling you, look, clean energy can protect your health, it can protect the community, can protect the environment, let's work together. So we're really trying to leverage that. So this is some other angles to perceptions that we might want to consider. Thanks.
Thanks very much. And we have the last question in the room.
I'm actually an energy journalist from the Energy Action Project, and we report specifically on access to energy and the right to energy and energy poverty. So I actually wanted to make you, everybody in this room was obviously interested in this, so I wanted to make you aware of a couple of things that have happened in Europe recently. There's a group of academics called the Cost Engager Network who have put out a right to energy toolkit, and it's available on our website, and I'll certainly send that to you so that you have access to it and can share it. They have also I've done with them a series of podcasts on the right to energy, and it starts with what is the right to energy from the human rights perspective, and then it goes into what is a policy framework for the right to energy. Then we have a podcast from a human rights lawyer in Uganda who is launching a case against energy companies. And then the fourth one is really the right to a dignified life and the right to energy. But I also wanted to just mention, because you mentioned TikTok, we have a social media campaign on Instagram that we just call Everyday Energy. And the idea of that is to, every day with photos and legends, tell a simple story about energy, because we believe everyone needs to get energy. That means both have access to energy and understand energy. So no questions.
Great. Please do share that. And I think we can post it. Yeah, we can post that. So fantastic. That's. I'm going to. We've got about 1 minute left. 2 minutes left. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to sum up in a summing up, just to say one sentence of their own key takeaway from today's discussion. I'll take you in the same order that I was giving you the floor. So, and I'm afraid that's your one sentence.
Well, I think the just transition needs to be a human rights transition, leaving no one behind.
Heather.
The energy transition has such important opportunities for protecting the individual's health, the health of the community, and the health of our planet, and we all should be taking and playing our part.
Thank you. Leon.
I think it's important to understand how effective and compelling narratives that reach the guts and the hearts of the majority of the people is a necessary strategy to achieve a just transition for all.
Rodrigo.
I just repeat the phrase, a say that's now is repeated everywhere from environmental organizations, social movements in Europe and internationally. We can't mine our way out of climate change. Thank you very much.
Anastasia.
The right of access to information, public participation and decision-making, and access to justice are key to ensure a just and transition towards clean energy that leaves no one behind.
Please, Jean-Pierre.
I will summarize everything by one word: impact. I think we should all take into consideration the impact of what we do when we buy things or services. And we usually look for one element, surprise. Next time, look for the impact.
Just add awareness, because we really need to be aware of what impact we all have on this. And on this, I would like to thank everybody. This was a wonderful, really interesting discussion. Thank you so much. Really interesting perspectives, and very big thanks to 2050 Today and also to the Geneva Environment Network for this event. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.